Good evening. Today's November 19, 2020, and this is our sixth Rotary District 5010 Community and Grassroots Local Economy Building Seminar. And tonight we're going to talk about success stories, about communities which took a big economic hit when a primary industry closed or otherwise something happened, and then they went on to not only survive but thrive. And our first presenter tonight is Professor Don Albrecht, who has spearheaded quite a number of economic rejuvenation programs around the U.S. West. And Don, I guess you're going to be basically telling us war stories of places you've been and things that have communities that have pulled together to survive and thrive. So take it away.
All right. I will do that if I can find my, yeah. Trying to get my screen share to work here. Here we go. Okay, can everybody see my screen? All right, it's good to be with all of you, and like Joe said, I've spending my career working with communities and helping them with their development efforts, and what I would like to do, just to begin with, is take a minute and ask all of you to, you could do it in the chat, or you could tell me, you can just talk. What are the things that make your community a great place to live? Let me stop the screen share for a second and open up the chat. And so you guys can either type it in the chat, or let's just take a minute or two and tell me why your community is a great place to live. Anybody want to start this off?
Don, it's Woody Angst. I really am grateful for the sense of community with my neighbors. Neighbors could be the other residents on the street where I live, but it's also my neighbors who are the merchants that provide me the goods and services and make this a place where I'm happy to make my home and raise my family.
Okay, thank you. I like people like each other. In the world today, I might have to move up there and join you guys. Strong arts, vibrant arts, generous, small town environment that's modern, livable. Okay, very good. I appreciate that, and I'm gonna hang on to those, and you know, this is the kind of thing I do, and so I always am interested in what people are looking for, what we can do to help make a great community. Now, second question, and again, you can tell me, or you can write in the chat. What do you consider the most significant problems and concerns that your community faces? Okay, what are the problems or concerns? Okay, do you want to put those in the chat? And okay, solid waste disposal, homelessness. Dale, where do you live? Okay. Dependent on tourism, which is non-existent. Okay. Anchorage. Housing, impacts of tourism, lack of diversity, fisheries, people too divided. All right. Very good. I appreciate that. And if others come up, feel free to add them in, and I will spend some time looking at them when we're done here. Well, today, like Joe says, I'm going to share some war stories, or tell some examples of some of the places that I've worked. So my job, I am the director of the Western Rural Development Center. That's me with a star. My office is at Utah State. But I work with the 13 Western states, including Alaska. I have the greatest job in the world. It's even better when there's not a pandemic and I can go visit people in all of these communities. I have a counterpart in the other regions, and between the four of us, we cover the entire all 50 states and all territories as well. Now, so what I do is I work with communities all over. We share information. We help them, you know, understand what they're facing and help deal with it. We have a program to help communities build a strategic plan so that they decide what they want to be when they grow up, and then we make a plan to help them go get it. And primary obstacles. So the number one most significant obstacle that we face in trying to do this is people that are resistant to change. You know, they hate to recognize that the world is changing and that their community is going to have to change with it. There's a desire to go back to some golden era in a lot of places. You know, so for example, I was in Idaho once, and a county commissioner said to me, the problem up here is back in 1960 we had 9 sawmills. Now we have 1 sawmill. So if you could bring back the other 8 sawmills, our problems would be solved. Well, the 8 sawmills aren't coming back. It's a different world than it used to be, and COVID has really sped up these changes. I think it's added some diversity and some problems to the situation. And so I'm gonna tell some stories. Let's start with Moab, Utah. Okay, this is a picture of Moab in the relatively recent future. It's quite a pretty little green place there. It's only green because they pull water out of the Colorado River and irrigate it. Without irrigation, that would look like the rocks where the picture is taken. There's nothing grows in that part of the world. So Moab was, for the first half of this century, it was a sleepy little farm and ranch community. The main thing they were known for is fruit. They grew some good peaches and apples and apricots and pears and those kinds of things. But for decades, there'd been a gradual decline in Moab, and the population was gradually going away. And then in the 1950s, they found some uranium nearby. And during the 50s, they had a big uranium boom. And also other nearby communities like Grand Junction, Colorado, had a boom. The population about tripled. And as a consequence, they still have a Superfund site right on the edge of town where they're trying to clean up the mess from the uranium. But when the uranium boom ended, then the town started slipping back again. And then one day they got the brilliant idea that, you know what we have in Moab is the main thing we have is amenities. So in the vicinities, there's 3 national parks. There's Capitol Reef. These are a couple pictures of Capitol Reef. There is Arches, a delicate arch. It's on the Utah license plates, if you've seen a Utah license plate. And there is Canyonlands. And I don't think there's anywhere in Alaska that looks like Canyonlands. Anyway, it's a fabulously beautiful kind of place. And so the tourism industry began to boom. And talking to Rosie earlier, and she goes there, and it became a booming, vibrant, busy community. But also, some of you mentioned some of the issues with tourism, and Moab was dealing with these problems as well. First of all, a big problem with tourism is it's very seasonal. And so they needed a much bigger workforce in the summer than they needed in the rest of the months. And so there's a lot of seasonal, low pay jobs. And so that was a problem, you know, that it's hard to get a stable, vibrant community when a lot of the workforce is only there seasonal and have low pay jobs. And then they had a lot of housing issues. Housing became very expensive. It's one of the most expensive places housing is one of the most expensive in the state of Utah, but average wages were among the lowest because of all the low pay service jobs. And so we worked with them, and what they realized was they needed better paying, permanent, year-round kind of jobs. And so they were able to bring some of those in. It's big in boating and biking and those kinds of things. And so some of the bicycle repair stuff has actually gone in there. And then there's a lot of people, and COVID has picked up this. There's more and more people that recognize that they can live where they want. So a lot of them say, well, why not live in a nice small community in a beautiful environment? And so a lot of those kind of people are moving as well. And for the most part, Moab is doing, they're doing very well. They're a vibrant, booming place, and talk to people that live there. It's a great place to live. Okay, let me talk about.
Don, a quick question about Moab. Did I
Sure.
see an article a year or two ago in the Wall Street Journal about a lot of the in these tech startups, the entrepreneurs starting to flee California and go to places like Moab?
Yes, yes, and it's a community I wasn't going to talk, but I got. There is it's called Airborne ECS, Environmental Control Systems. Anyway, we worked, this is one of the targets in St. George, Utah. We found out today that they're moving to St. George with 73 really good paying jobs. And so, but the startup, the IT, the high tech, and a lot of these, and there's another place I'm going to talk about that. So a lot of them are moving to places like this. California is just really expensive. And besides that, this is the kind of job, the kind of industry you can set up where you want, you know? Why not catch a can, I guess, is what I'm saying there. So let me talk about another community in Utah, Kanab. Anybody been to Kanab, Utah? Okay, it's about 3 miles from the Arizona border, actually. It's way down in southern Utah. Kanab was another sleepy farm and ranch community where the population had been declining for decades. In the thing the community thought was their savior was nearby. There's what's called the Kaparowitz Plateau, and on the Kaparowitz, there's a huge coal field that has never been economically viable because it is so isolated and the country is so rough trying to get there. And then in the 1970s, they proposed building a power plant actually on the Kaparowitz. And so you wouldn't have to ship the coal out. All you'd have to do is build a power line out of there. Well, and so the people of Kanab were thrilled. They thought, okay, this is going to bring us some good paying jobs. But it was also right on the edge of several national parks, Grand Canyon, Zion, Bryce, and there was lots of opposition. And the opposition was led by the actor Robert Redford. And eventually the Kaparowitz, the opposition got too great, and they pulled up stakes and says, we're not going to do it. So Kanab had a big event where they hung Robert Redford in effigy because of his efforts to kill the coal plant. But again, like Moab, Kanab came to the conclusion that what they have is amenities. They're right on the edge of Zion's National Park. picture of Zion's and another one. And so it's actually easier to get into Zion's from Kanab than it is from St. George on the other side of it. It's also with a very short drive to Bryce Canyon National Park. And here's another picture of Bryce Canyon in the winter. And so as we worked with them, they recognize that amenities is their benefit. And so they are following the same path as Moab. They're several years behind them. The process started later. And I think they can also avoid some of the problems that Moab faced with the housing and the low wage industries by getting on top of this and getting some of the better paid jobs in earlier in the process. And so Kanab is doing very, very well as well. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that yet. So let me, so there's lots, there's a community we worked in Arizona called, it's in Greenlee County. Greenlee County is known for the Morenci copper mine. It's the largest copper mine in the United States. And okay, the average. Okay, let me back up. And Rosie says she loves. I just opened up the chat, so let me deal with some of these. These are good questions. What does the average house cost in Moab? I'm not sure. It's 300 and something thousand, which for Utah is pretty heavy. What did we do? Okay, so that's a good question. What we do is we have a strategic planning process that we help communities go through. We look at their assets, and then we look at what they want to be when they grow up. That goes back to the question I asked you guys: what you like about your community, and so based on that, we have a matching model where we can match industries that will work, and so then they can go after those. So yeah, Robert Redford. Okay, the same thing with Kanab. So, you know, with both Moab and Kanab and all of these others, what we do is go in there, we get a group of people together, and we take them through a process. We let them decide what they want to be when they grow up, and then we'll look at their assets, you know, based on if you're lacking certain assets, then there's certain doors that are just simply going to be closed to you, and no use chasing that dog. I'm Homer 50% granola crunchers, 50% rednecks. That actually sounds like Kanab as well. So same kind of thing. I like this, and so then we run our model, and we can point them towards, help them understand what's going to work in the modern world. You know, in the 21st century economy, not chasing something that has declining employment, but we help them understand what will work in the future and point them in that direction. I really appreciate your input on this. So let me, and you know, I got a bunch of communities I could talk about. I'm not going to have time to get to all of them, obviously, but so the Morenci copper mine, biggest copper mine in the United States. And it is still growing strong, and we still have a big market for copper in this country. But
yeah. Oh, wait a minute.
What's happening is that the copper mine is increasingly becoming better technology, more mechanized, and they need fewer workers. And so the workforce is declining while the amount of copper being mined is actually increasing. What that means for the community is that there's just fewer jobs. And so we went through the same process with Greenlee County, the town of Morenci, and we help them understand the skills. You know, they've got a lot of people with skills that have been working in the copper mine, driving big equipment, some of that kind of stuff. And so we help line them up with, and you know, that's a community that doesn't have the amenity advantages of Kanab and Moab, but they do have workers with skills. And another thing is the mine, while they're not hiring people, they still have a lot of inputs. So another thing that they're doing is developing little firms that produce inputs that the mine needs and can buy from them. So let me talk about the city of Price, Utah. Anybody been to Price? So it is a community that has a long history of coal mining. It's in Carbon County, actually. Yeah, so the Greeks, it's a one town in Utah where you can find some Eastern Orthodox churches, because 100 years ago they were bringing in Eastern Europeans to work in the coal mines. Okay, David's been through Kanab, I'm sure. It is beautiful, but so they're bringing all these Eastern Europeans to work in the coal mines. They had a couple of disastrous accidents, a couple of times where coal mines collapsed and 100 or more people were killed twice 100 years ago. And so that was what this community was dependent on. Then for the last several decades, with the decline of coal, the community has just gradually been drying up, you know, more and more unemployed people. You go down Main Street and half the buildings are closed and boarded up and broken windows, and lots of drug problems, a big opioid problem, speed trap. Yes, it is a speed trap. And you have to go through Price to get to Moab if you're going from Salt Lake. So, yep. So we worked with the Price and the neighboring county, and again the same thing. Okay, they don't have the tremendous amenity advantages of some of these other communities, but they do have some advantages. It's not very far to I-70, so they can get products to Denver easily. It's 60 miles to Provo and Salt Lake and the Wasatch Front. So they got a good location there, and they've got a workforce with skills who've been doing things with coal mining and mechanical. And so they've actually developed some of those types of industries. They're also getting some more little high pay, some scientific research kind of firms. These are also popping up in Kanab and Moab as well, because distance doesn't matter as much in those kind of communities. And so, yeah, you know, I mean, it's not magic, but things are turning around. They're developing some more better paid jobs at communities. So one time when we were working tell you one more story here. When we were working in Price, I'm talking to them and I'm telling them that number one, coal is not going to come back, I'm afraid. I tell them that, and that natural gas and the renewables are competing with it for price and with the greenhouse gases and everything. And so you guys need to look beyond the coal. You need to find other things to do. And I got through with my presentation, and a woman came up and says, you know, it's people like you that are the problem here. We're a coal town. We've always been a coal town. We're always going to be a coal town. And so, and if they would have chosen to do that, they would continue to be declining, I'm afraid. And so so a big thing is just understanding where you are, what your assets are, what direction the world is going. And let me stop here for now. I could talk about couple more, but anybody have any questions, any insights, any thoughts?
Don, I seem to recall one time when you were talking with me regarding the St. Maries, Idaho sawmills, the 9 down to 1. Did you mention to me that, that one sawmill was putting out more timber than the 9 were?
Yes,
Or did I
yes.
remember wrong?
Yeah, and that's and with the same amount of workforce as that one sawmill has always had, they can produce more timber than 9 sawmills could in 1960.
So
And
those sawmills weren't coming back because one of them modernized and became efficient, and
yep,
the others became obsolete.
yep, and now the one can produce all that the market can bear. Okay, here, how is
So
Utah
what did you
education
do?
system training young people in schools to deal with the challenges facing the state's new job for a post-world COVID? Well, okay, this is a really good question. One thing the state of Utah has done is they've recognized that for rural Utah, the future is not going to bring back the coal industry and those kinds of things, and so they've developed what they call a rural online initiative. So they're training people in rural communities, making them aware of the opportunity to earn money from their computer and then giving them the skills to do so. At the same time, Utah has a fine the college system is good. We got some good universities here, but actually our per capita expenditure on K through 12 is 50th in the nation right now.
Wow.
And so what we're doing is probably not very well in training schools to deal with the challenges. And so, this is something that I am talking myself blue about, but it is a problem. And yeah, any other questions? There's other. Let me just mention one more quickly. There's over in Colorado. There's it's Garfield County. It's on the west slope of the Rockies there, just north of Grand Junction. There's a couple little towns. There's Silt and Parachute and Rifle. If you're familiar with that, it's along I-70 along the Colorado River. Anyway, this is a county that has historically been dependent on oil and gas. When oil and gas is going well, the community does well. And but it's kind of a roller coaster. And I think you in Alaska probably understand that, the ups and downs of the oil industry. But then what they found out is that they're about 45 minutes to an hour drive from both Aspen and Vail, and there's lots of people who had jobs in Aspen and Vail but couldn't afford to live there because they're some of the most expensive places to live in the country. And so they were living in Silt and Parachute and making the drive up. And then they realized that to help with the ups and downs with the oil and gas industry, that with their location right along I-70, the nearness to the Colorado Rockies and the amenities there, so they've been able to attract a number of scientific and research kind of firms, small ones, 5 or 10 people with highly educated people, and it's done very well for them. Will asked, do you have any experience with very small Alaska Native communities that don't have road access? No, I do not. And someday I hope that one of you guys will take me to one of these places, and when the pandemic is over and we can travel, because I'd very much be interested in getting to know some of these communities. And again, this is a really interesting thing. When you don't have road access, then obviously that's when you're looking at your benefits and your attributes and those kinds of things, that's a problem. And a lot of places in Alaska that that's going to be something that is difficult to overcome for a lot of industries, but others it isn't. And so you just have to point yourself towards the things that work, and avoid the things that will be problematic because you don't have the assets to make them happen. But very good question. So I would love to go there someday.
Don, if I'm not mistaken, does the computer model that the university consortium developed, does that factor in things like road access or not?
Yep.
Or
Yep.
these other factors there?
Yep.
So
Yep.
it could, the data there would be applicable, but just point people in a different direction.
Yeah, it would point people towards things that would, given their assets. So it takes into account two things. Number one, what are your assets? What do you have? And what don't you have? If you don't have road access, if you don't have an interstate highway, obviously, it takes that into account. And then what do you want? What do you want to be? Not going back earlier when I asked you guys what you liked about your community. I really appreciated that you said things like, an arts community, lots of recreation, not nearby, small town environment, great outdoors. Okay, and the people in your communities, probably your goal is not to become Seattle. I'm thinking, and
Or Anchorage.
or Anchorage.
At least for those of us in the Kenai Peninsula.
Yeah, and so if you a lot of times what people want is just a few better, like Moab. Okay, what Moab wanted was a few year-round, good-paying jobs that could provide them the community with the base that they needed, and that's something they can do. They don't want to be Salt Lake. They don't want to be Denver, but what they needed was a few well-paying jobs, and they can go in that direction and make that happen.
I remember one time, I just toss in, I remember one time being up on top of Diamond Ridge in Homer and looking out. There was another couple there. My wife and I were up there on the way home then, and we got chatting, and he commented that he was a mechanical engineer who designed medical infusion systems for Johnson & Johnson. And one time he decided, having made a trip to Homer, that since he could do it in Homer, he would much rather look out at the glaciers and the mountains and the ocean than look out at other houses in Las Vegas where they were living. So they just upped and moved to Homer, and he's doing the same thing he was doing before. But
yeah, absolutely. And
looking out at the ice fields, the ocean, and the mountains.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's more and more, and I think COVID has sped this process up, that more and more we've realized there's more industries, more people who could live where they want to live, and you don't have to be in New York or DC or Los Angeles to run your business anymore. You can be in Homer, or Moab.
I see a question here. I'm sorry, from Ron Inouye. How do you put together your initial group to begin the process? Is it always inclusive enough to bring community consensus? Well, that's going to be our next forum, and then we're actually going to start doing that in January, Ron. So this is kind of wrapping up the informational stuff, and then we're going to start operationalizing things next 2 weeks from now.
Yeah. So, and just your question, bring community consensus. It is I think we do a really good job at it, but it is an ongoing fight, I guess, all the time. Okay. Okay, let me. All right. Well, Joe, let me turn time over to you, and then we can have some more time for discussion.
Okay.
I'll look at some of these questions while you're talking, and maybe I can answer a few more later on. Okay.
Okay. And I'll talk fast.
Okay.
The second part, we had hoped to go and have the author here, but they're in the East Coast and they're busy doing with the election stuff. Starting in 2013, James Fallows and his wife from the Atlantic magazine, nationally prominent journalist and well-respected, flew their own small aircraft over 100,000 miles and visited 42 different communities, looking at places that were succeeding and places that were not succeeding. And out of that, and they have a good book. It's called, and I'll show it here. The book is called Our Towns, and this is out of that book, which made good sense. So what I try to do is distill some of the information that they had there when the original author wasn't able to be with us tonight. Some of the places they looked at were everywhere from the U.S. West through dying mill towns in New England and the Southeast, one of which was Greenville, South Carolina, which went from a boarded up dying mill town when all the textile mills went overseas to a very thriving place with the headquarters of the North American headquarters of BMW and a lot of other very successful, many often technology based, but not always businesses. And the way Greenville did that in South Carolina through a series of both conservative Republican and Democratic local governments over 30 or 40 years as they came together and they worked together for the benefit of the community, and they turned it into the kind of place that BMW and its executives wanted to be in. And that tended to bring in other places as well. Now, obviously, BMW's North American headquarters is a lot bigger than the sorts of things that would work in many smaller towns, but the principle is the same. By turning Greenville, South Carolina, a dying mill town with a boarded up downtown, into a place where people wanted to live and were able to work from there, they turned the town around. I personally witnessed some of that where I was growing up in a dying coal town in Pennsylvania. So I can definitely resonate with Don's experiences in coal towns. I came out of one of those coal towns. And in fact, truth be told, I was the first person in my extended family to graduate from high school, let alone anything else. So what do successful communities seem to have in common? And this is coming primarily out of the Fallows book. Well, they found about 10.5 community success indicators. And to recapitulate a bit from what we heard from the State Department of Labor economists in our very first session, our Alaska economy and our residents have been in recession since 2015. Just as we were starting to start on our way back up out of that, we got hit with COVID. The state economists now expect it's going to take 3 years to get back to our recessionary levels. But, and obviously a lot of that has to do with the price of oil, our up and down commodity, which in some ways is, I've often likened it, even when I was speaking with Governor Palin years ago, I likened it to being in a colonial economy. We have a first world society. People are well educated. People know what to do. They've traveled. They're successful. But we're dependent upon global commodity prices for something that's a fungible commodity like oil, and the decisions about whether oil is produced here and invested in here or somewhere else, those decisions are made in government and the business offices that are thousands of miles away. Fundamentally, we have no more control over the big factors that affect our economy than many. Then of course there are other factors such as the recent drop in fish production, et cetera. But a lot of communities have survived and thrived under much worse. And the question is why? Well, the Fallows book rang true for my own experience when I was growing up in a dying coal town, which partially turned itself around. And successfully rebuilding communities, which means as well diversifying more resilient successfully rejuvenating economies seem to have several things in common. And some of these seem almost counterintuitive or odd, but that was a consistent finding. Well, this one isn't a big surprise. People work together on practical local solutions to our own problems. We get along because we need to help each other out rather than just fight over national politics. Successful communities get along to the point where they can solve local problems rather than get divided excessively over national issues. Another thing is it's pretty obvious to people in the community who are those, what they were often calling local patriots. Who are those people who are working on the long-term solutions to improve the community's future? They were known invisible. There was a real working partnership between local businesses, professionals, and private community leaders and local government. People were working together to make the communities do better. People knew the story and the history of their communities and why it's special. As an example, on the Kenai Peninsula, commercial fishing has been in our DNA, our cultural DNA, for decades. It's a large part of who we are and what we think about, as well as things like fishing the Kenai River or offshore oil and gas platforms and that sort of thing. It's part of our cultural DNA. We know about it, and we have some pride in that history. Not to mention Russian churches going back 200 years. We know the story of our community and why it's special. Another thing that was, and not all of these were true of every place, but these were consistent themes. There were clearly discernible downtown areas that had a history, what people call good bones. They were older buildings that were kept up well. They had neat stores, fun places to go, good restaurants, microbreweries, art galleries, the kind of place you want to walk around and spend an hour or two and maybe stop in a store and chat and buy something. Typically, but not always, they were near a public research university. There have been more studies than I could count almost that research universities have become one of the primary engines of 21st century economic growth. And why do we talk about 21st century economic growth? Well, we're in the 21st century, and we can choose to, stay to evolve with the rest of the world and stay part of it and do well, or we could try to choose to perhaps try to, if you will, exit out of whatever's happening in the rest of the world and become gradually irrelevant and poor. I've seen towns that have done that. I grew up in one initially. It is not a wise thing to do. Personally, I would say that. Another, they have a local community college that teaches job skills. We're pretty lucky in Alaska because we have a wide panoply of colleges that do that, whether it's the Kenai Peninsula College in Soldotna that teaches oil field jobs and skills and mining jobs and skills, or the branch in Homer that teaches marine and commercial fishing, or other marine technologies, whether it's the branches up in Fairbanks or Kotzebue that go and provide things, or down in the Southeast. But people have a community college that helps teach job skills that are more specific and better paying. One thing that may not be very common in Alaska, but it was a real factor in other places, they have distinctive and innovative K-12 schools that residents know about and they're proud of. And that was a surprise. That was surprisingly a factor all across the United States through all sectors. They tend to be open and welcoming to others. The world is changing around us, and places that are open and welcoming tend to attract talent that help rejuvenate a community. They have big plans and they actively pursue them. Energy is probably more important than almost anything at this point. And number 10 and a half, as we said, number 10 and a half, one of the surprises was that towns that are in the way up tend to have local artisan microbreweries and small distilleries, which are gathering places, and who knows why, but that seemed to be a consistent factor. Other factors that were identified as positive to long-term growth were pervasive public art, well-maintained public walkways along rivers, lakes, and ocean beaches. In other words, nice places to live. Okay, our Rotary 2020-2021 District 5010 theme is Rotary helping our communities. That's why we're here. Now, I'm going to make a personal note. I grew up in Appalachia. I grew up in a dying coal town, as I said. I was the first person in my family to get out of high school, let alone go off to MIT for college and grad school. I've, that town was dying. A group of community leaders got together and decided to start diversifying the economy. Given that there was a group of interstate highways, major interstates, were going to come together very near the town. Interstate 80, one of the biggest in the country, most traveled in the country, and Interstate 81, which became a primary north-south trucking route for heavy freight. And what they ended up doing was going and setting up a major manufacturing facility near the junction of those two, which evolved into a very large warehousing and transshipment facility, such that those are pretty decent jobs again. There's no coal mining left. Coal is dead. Hard coal is dead. If they'd stayed with it, these 50,000 people should have just gotten up and gone away. But they were able to turn around and bring in enough industry to keep the town alive. Faltering was a kind word for the economy when I was growing up there. Let's see. Now, those of you who have had the misfortune to hear my district governors talk in your clubs may recall how I talked about social capital. Well, how does Rotary fit into that? And I'm almost done. Well, sociologists tell us that social capital are those informal local networks of people who work together to make the communities function smoothly and grow. Now, obviously, they vary from community to community. In a sense, you can consider that another name for the sustained engagement of business, professional, citizen, and governmental leaders to make, through community service, if you will, to make the town, the community a better place. That sounds like Rotary to me. Now, over the last 20 years, there's been substantial documentation how people have not participated as much in community and service organizations. Ron Putnam, who's the dean of Harvard's Kennedy School of Government, he wrote a book called Bowling Alone, which document that kind of thing. But paradoxically, at the same time, people, especially the younger people who are our not yet Rotarians, are the desire to help make change and to move things forward is very strong. They're kind of lacking in a way, lacking in the sense of direction and the ability to coalesce and work together in a way where we magnify each other's efforts. That's partly a problem. It's partly an opportunity. We know that every community organization, service organization, has seen some decline in engagement and membership over the last 30, 40 years, but that doesn't mean people aren't interested in getting together and helping and working. So I would suggest so much of this, it is Rotary. Social capital, the idea of coming together to start turning the needle and putting our communities back on the path toward future greatness or near-term greatness, and engaging those people who have a high desire to help but aren't necessarily yet part of an effectively organized group. That is our opportunity. So I would suggest Rotary could be the epitome of positive social capital and the ideal group to bring a community together and inspire grassroots community and local economy building efforts. And next week, that's where we start. So why are we doing this? Strong, diversified communities are important to everybody. They provide jobs for our kids and our grandkids. They provide resilience in the face of change in the world, a better place to live, if nothing else. And stable economies make for stable communities, which makes for less turmoil and conflict in the long term. These are all things for which these are part of Rotary's core ideals. And that's where I think we are headed. So we are looking forward next week to starting to lay down the process and the practical application, if you will, as well as then getting started and actually putting into effect next beginning of the year. So as I like to end my DG talks, that's my story and I'm sticking to it. I'm done.
Thank you, Joe. And I really appreciate what Joe has stood for a long, long time. And that is, as Rotary, as members of the community, of stepping up and being involved in making your community a better place to live. And it's people like you that make me happy.
Don, we have a great district. We have great Rotarians. We've got a great district. We have a massive amount. For a group of 1,600 people, there's a lot of talent and energy in this group. It's just a matter of, all of us achieving our focus. And I think that's where we're going. I have nothing else to say. Who has questions?
I have a question about the Utah gateway communities to getting into the national parks. That's a really interesting idea. I wonder what the local communities were able to achieve. Were they offering certain incentives, or were they discovered by the tourism companies that this was a good way to sort of build another infrastructure to feed their own system of getting more travelers to use their motels and their services? Where does that leadership become sort of a drag on your economy because all of a sudden you're discovered and everyone descends on you?
Good question. And so let's take Zion National Park. On the one side, you got Springdale. And if you've been to Zion lately and went through from that, Springdale has been totally overwhelmed, and Kanab is on the other side. And what Kanab did is they said, they got control at the beginning, said, okay, we have a vision for what we want our community to be like, and we are going to make the decisions, not let the people outside do that. And, we were working with them as well. And also they said, we want to have something beyond the low pay, low skill temporary jobs that tourism develops alone. And so, the county and community leadership got the handle on it early. Does that make sense? And they decided what they wanted to do and how they wanted to do it, and therefore led the pack. On the other side, Springdale just got run over.
Did they use tax incentives, or what were the mechanisms that they used to actually help envision what they actually wanted?
Tax mechanisms, zoning, to all the tools that the local community, the planning and zoning, and saying these are the types of businesses we're going to allow in these parts of town, and getting a handle on it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Make sense?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, a question came up. Is there an exit plan? And this is a really good, most communities, somebody lives there and it's their home and they like it and they would like to save it. Before I got my current job, I worked at Texas A&M for many years. And one time I went to this community in West Texas, and it was August, and I drove into town, and it was 109 degrees and the wind was blowing and dust was flying around. And I thought, this town probably shouldn't have been here in the first place. It might be better off if somebody just locked the door and we all left, but somebody in that town grew up there and they love it and see something about it. And so, if there's somebody willing to fight for it, it's the community's worth fighting for, I guess.
Don, my legal assistant moved down there when her husband was transferred with Chevron Oil, which is why a lot of those places are there. And she wrote back how they had to get their house fumigated every 3 months to, get the scorpions out or kill the scorpions, and put sulfur in their yard all the time to keep the rattlesnakes from coming toward the house. So I would be inclined personally to agree with that, but there's a lot of oil there. That may be why their people are there.
Yeah. So is it possible to make change in your county without entering the dangerous field of politics? really good question. You know, my philosophy is, and the way my center does things is we provide scientifically sound and politically neutral information. Our job is to, and it's not my job to decide what Ketchikan it's going to be like. It's the residents of Ketchikan, but I can provide you with the best data available on what will work and what won't work in Ketchikan, and it's going to be scientifically sound, and I'm going to present it. Facts are not political. Facts are facts. So, yeah.
Now, there was a question here that mentioned that among many economic sectors that are somewhat high tech, they do not require proximity to research universities or to population centers. Communication based sectors like web design, video, and all. That's certainly true. I think my comment about the university proximity is that to drive major growth, that seems to be one of the 2 or 3 biggest economic drivers in the 21st century. Just an example, what Stanford did in what is now Silicon Valley, or MIT did around the Boston area, where the Boston area around MIT, it was like, what if you subtracted it out from the rest of the US, it would still be one of the biggest economies in the world, mostly from university-driven entrepreneurial operations, defense, biotechnology, that kind of thing. A lot of computer and electronic stuff. It's a major driver, but certainly some of the stuff like web design or video production doesn't need to be near a research university. It can be anywhere.
Yeah, and Joe, on this topic, I think COVID has made us increasingly aware that more and more of these not only not need to be near a research university, they don't need to be near a big city. These are the kind of things that you can put in more isolated communities. And so,
did you send me that?
You guys like your snakes, you like your bears better than snakes and scorpions, huh?
Yes. Hey, Don, didn't you send me an article a few months ago that talked to where the Central Kenai Peninsula was rated as one of the 15 best places for new small, high-tech small entrepreneurs to get started because of the amenities and on the one hand and the excellent broadband on the other.
Yep. Which is a key. In the modern world, excellent broadband is absolutely critical. And if that's something you don't have, it's something that needs to be dealt with. I think that's these days it's way more important than roads, having road access. Yep. Bear, did I hear a bear got run over by a landing plane or something? Was that
737 in Yakutat?
Oh my.
Yes, it did. And some good friends had to investigate the accident.
Oh, what was there much damage to the plane?
The bear ran out from under the nose gear just before touchdown, but couldn't dodge that left engine nacelle. So it goobered up the left engine pretty bad.
That's
so,
a lot of money.
I mean, Sully has problems with geese. Can you imagine a bear strike?
And those are brown bear over there. They're big.
Yeah, they are.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Well, do we have any other questions? In 2 weeks, we're going to start talking about the process and actually putting it into operation beginning early in the coming year. So I hope to see everybody and lots more from all the different clubs. I'm going to invite all the club presidents specifically and the president-elects to participate so we get some ideas of what's possible and what can be done. And remember, it's not going to cost your club anything. This can be a great project for your neighborhood in Anchorage or your small town in Southeast or up farther north in Alaska or to the west or whatever. and we've managed to work it so that your clubs will be cost-free. You know, we know that this is a tough time financially. It's doable. So hope to see everybody. Are there any last questions or comments or anything like that?
Hey, Joe, I had a question about let me share my screen one more time.
Oh, sure.
Because I had a question about, no, trying to find about contact information.
Oh, yeah, Don, why not just type it? What we can do is I'll go and type it into my email. I'll rename myself to my email. And that's our 21st century identifier anyway. That's how everybody knows us.
Okay.
So there's
yeah.
mine. If you rename yourself to your email, then that'll work for people too.
This is Jim Carmichael in Kodiak. I'd like to make a few quick and somewhat disjointed comments. We're off the road system. Kodiak's, as all of you know, is an island. And the point I'd like to make is the need for local advocacy. So as what we need is ferry service, marine highway, and also university. And so we have a very good local college. It's tough to keep the marine highway up to the standards, up to the level of service that we need. And an interesting demographic point is we rely on people coming into work temporary in the hospital. Quite a few of them, and they maintain cars and housing here for people coming in and out. And Tom, who's also on here, can perhaps correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe out of those people coming in, about 1 in 4 decide to stay. That's a pretty high percentage. So I think what it says is a lot of people like Kodiak. Once you're here a while, you like the isolation, you like being off the road system, you like a lot of the features that you have, but it takes a little getting used to. And it takes people getting here to begin with. So, and then we are dependent, of course, besides air service, on the ferry system, and we're dependent upon having the fisheries research. And so those are both things that Kodiak really has to fight for as a community, and I think other communities the same way.
Hey, Jim, and you got the space launch facility there, which is fairly active. I know Lindsay's on the board for that. One of our active district level people. I mean, you got some pretty interesting stuff there with just the SEAL training base, the Navy SEAL, not the flippered SEAL.
Yeah, right.
The space launch facility. I mean, you got some cool stuff happening in Kodiak. It's a well-kept secret.
It really is. Yeah, and the fact that it is, they're just not noticed, and so fortuitously, the space launch facility gives us the broadband that we need, and so we're really lucky in having that. The combination of things that we have, the fishing history, Coast Guard, and of course the broadband. So it's a pretty good place to. But you have to figure out what the scale is that you want to do, or scale of what you're capable of doing, and target that.
I'll bet Don's database, comprehensive as it is, does not already include listing assets, a space launch facility on an island, or a Navy SEAL training base on an island. Don, I think you're lacking on a few things maybe there.
Yeah, that's true. So Jim, what's the population of Kodiak?
Well, the borough, Tom, correct me if I'm wrong. I think the borough is around 12,000, and I've never been able to figure out where they are because the city is about 6,000. The road system may be another 3,000 or 4,000. There's a lot of people squirreled around places in the Kodiak Island borough, which includes all of Kodiak, which is about 3,600 square miles. It's about the same size as the big island of Hawaii, but without a road system, of course. And so there's a lot of people that just live out there in the bush someplace, and So, but 12,000, give or take, between 12 and 14,000 in the borough.
Okay. So this is Pahrump, Nevada you're talking about, Craig. That's the.
Yes, it is. Yeah, that's, I work with the National Restoration Center down there, which is a place that we collect old radios and they go down and get rehabilitated. The really nice ones go to places like the Collins Museum and the Smithsonian and so on. And the ones that are just good end up going to the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts for merit badge work and jamboree on the air and that sort of thing. So it's a way of getting old radios into service and getting kids exposed to ham radio.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's about the end of the world.
It's
Yeah.
about an hour west of Las Vegas. So if you want to go to shop or see a show or do something like that, it's about an hour away from my location. It's about 15 minutes from the nation's largest shooting school if you want to go do firearm stuff.
Huh. Well, fascinating.
Yeah, I have heard it said that tourism is a really good way to expose people to a place, and actually is a good recruiting method, a good recruiting method to bring people into a community on a long-term basis. And one thing I think we forget is that Alaska is a real name brand. I mean, it's one of our assets, and granted, it's pretty intangible, but Alaska is a name brand. People think of it as big, beautiful, clean air, great outdoors, self-reliant, and with all those reality TV shows, I mean, they're going, and at least a subset of people, they're already going and advertising us for free. We ought to be building on that kind of thing. And tourism is one way to get them here in the first place.
Don or Joe, it's Woody Angst. Is there a cost, Don, for you or your organization to come in and be involved in the planning process to get this going? I'm talking about a cost to the community. Joe already said there's no cost to the individual Rotary Club.
We have funds that cover my expenses. Typically, we just need a little. And we're figuring out how to do this online, so we can do it as cheap as you would like. We can talk about that, but my purpose. Somebody else pays my salary. My purpose is not to make money. Does that make sense? To help communities. So we can.
Okay, enough said for now.
Woody, I was going to say, we're using district excess reserve fund allocation for the direct expenses, we'd have to pay for things like postage and that kind of thing, which are really the only expenses we would be anticipating at this point for a full-blown process like we've been talking about. And it's actually not even very much out of excess reserve funds. It was the small amount that I asked for and that the finance committee approved.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
as a practical matter, we're not looking at anything of consequence to anybody.
So Woody, where do you live?
I'm in Anchorage.
Okay. All right. Okay. Very good. Civil twilight. Now, how about December 21st? Is the civil twilight gone?
Hey, the days start getting longer, a few seconds at a time, but they start getting longer.
Okay. All right. Well, Joe, anything else for this time?
For me, we'll be talking to people again next week. 2 weeks.
Have a happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you, Don. So long, everyone.
And, this is always a vibrant discussion. So thanks, everybody. So long.
Joe.
What? Oh, yeah, Will, and hey, Jocelyn, yeah, guys.